Coming up on this Tuesday edition of Newsline at noon, police storm a Sydney cafe to end a 16-hour siege, killing the gunman. 2 hostages also die in the raid. The Transport Ministry slaps punitive measures against Korean Air over the so-called net rage incident and asks prosecutors to bring charges against the executive involved. Plus, concerns are growing that Korea-Japan ties will plunge to new lows as Prime Minister Shinzo Abe plans to keep his most hardline ministers to press ahead with his right-wing agenda. These stories and more on Newsline at noon. It's noon Tuesday, December 16th here in Korea. Thanks for tuning in. Live from Seoul, I'm Eoh Jin-joo.
It's very good to have you with us. I'm Mark Broom. Our top story this afternoon: the siege on a chocolate shop in Sydney's once bustling business centre ended in the early hours of this Tuesday morning, though not without loss of life, unfortunately. The bloody result of a police raid was the death of the gunman and also 2 hostages.
For more on this, we'll connect to our Eunice Kim, who's standing by at the news center. Eunice, Prime Minister Tony Abbott has come out to address the nation. What did he have to say?
Well, Jin-joo, he sent his condolences, first of all, to those immediately affected by this siege. That, of course, proved to be a deadly end for 2 hostages, a man and a woman in their 30s. He commended the officers who showed patience and bravery in responding to the situation and noted that even a country like Australia is not immune to an attack such as this.
These events do demonstrate that even a country as free, as open, as generous and as safe as ours is vulnerable to acts of politically motivated violence. But they also remind us that Australia and Australians are resilient and we are ready to respond.
Sydney residents expressed shock and sadness as well, with this 16-hour ordeal coming to a close in the pre-dawn hours of Tuesday. Prime Minister Abbott also instructed flags to be flown at half-mast at all Commonwealth buildings as a sign of respect for the victims. Now, we are learning more about the victims themselves. A mother of 3, 38-year-old woman identified as Katrina Dawson, and 34-year-old cafe manager Tori Johnson, according to various media reports. A swift police raid was conducted around 2 a.m. local time when police stormed that cafe following a loud bang heard from inside the Lindt Chocolate Cafe.
And the gunman, who has been identified as Iranian refugee Manharam Monis, he was on authorities' radar due to a past criminal record, but it seems that wasn't enough to prevent him carrying out this horrific deed.
That's right. His personal website suggests that he did pledge allegiance to the Islamic State group, but was not a formal member. His former lawyer also came out to tell local media that this was an act by one individual whose common sense was clouded by an extremely strong ideology. Reports say the 50-year-old was an Iranian refugee, as you said, a self-styled Islamic cleric, though he had no known followers. He was known to authorities as with a distinct rap sheet. He was charged last year with being an accessory to the murder of his ex-wife, and in 2012 was convicted of sending, quote, grossly offensive letters to families of soldiers killed in Afghanistan. He was reportedly out on bail on charges of sexual assault and had recently converted to Sunni Islam from Shia Islam.
Yeah, and police in the state of New South Wales have come out and said that the gunman was unstable, as you could pretty much see from the video there. He certainly seems like a rather disturbed person all round. Now let's turn it over to another story now. In what appears to be a desperate attempt by Moscow to prop up its slumping currency, the ruble, Russia's central bank has hiked its key interest rate to 17%.
Yeah, that's right. 17% from 10.5%. That marks the biggest rate rise since 1998. That is when the Russian government defaulted on its debt. The rate increase was announced at 1 a.m. in a 1 a.m. statement on the central bank's website, explaining that the move was aimed at limiting substantially increased ruble depreciation risks and inflation risks. The Russian currency, of course, has been falling. It fell actually to by more than 10% on Monday to a low of 67 to the U.S. dollar, marking a devaluation of nearly 50% this year. Russian leaders have been struggling to prop up its economy amid economic sanctions from the West and also a significant dip in oil prices that's proven to be detrimental to an economy that heavily depends on oil and gas. Moscow has spent some $80 billion in its foreign exchange reserves this year to prop up its troubled currency.
Right, and oil prices are showing no signs of peaking again, as it's now at $61 a barrel. We'll keep watching the story. Thank you very much, Eunice, for that report.
You bet.
Stay up to date on the latest news out of Korea. Connecting to our team of reporters about the issues that matter to Korea. On air, on your mobile, online. Find out more about Korea on Newsline at noon with Mark Broom and Eoh Jin-joo.
I'm Eoh Jin-joo with Pro.
Market researcher, strategy analytics, and Thursday that LG Electronics brought in about. Now, to the commotion about Korean Air and all the trouble caused by its former Vice President Jo Hyun-ah. The Transportation Ministry has announced the findings of its initial probe into this so-called nut rage incident and is going to take action against the airline.
And the ministry will ask prosecutors to bring charges against Cho, but it's still uncertain as to what charges she may face. Shin Se-min reports.
Korean Air will be forced to suspend operations or face fines for the now infamous actions of its former Vice President Cho Hyun-ah. The Transportation Ministry said in a briefing on Tuesday that it will take administrative action as they have determined that the Korean airline violated aviation safety regulations when Cho forced a flight bound for Seoul to return to the gate on December 5th. They also set up a special team that will review Korean Air's safety management system and determine whether the culture within the company influenced the pilot's decision to return to the gate. The ministry said the pilot was negligent for bowing to a passenger's anger over the way she was served macadamia nuts. Cho Hyun-ah may also face criminal charges. The Transportation Ministry will file a formal complaint with the prosecution by the end of Tuesday. The charges include causing a disturbance on a flight and verbally abusing crew members. She may also face charges of violating safety regulations. Prosecutors have summoned Cho for questioning on Wednesday. The troubled Cho resigned last week over her behavior that caused the plane to eventually return to the gate after it was ready for takeoff, as she yelled and ordered the flight attendant to leave the flight for serving a bag of nuts in the package. As a result, the flight that was carrying some 250 other passengers arrived 11 minutes late to Incheon from New York. Shin Se-min, ARIRANG News.
Korea's first Ebola A team will be heading to Sierra Leone on Sunday to help with global efforts to contain the deadly virus that has killed more than 6,800 people so far. But they first stopped in Britain to receive necessary training. Kwon So-ae reports.
Korean medical personnel are getting ready to join the fight against the deadly Ebola crisis in Sierra Leone. 4 doctors and 6 nurses arrived in southeast England this week for 5 days of training that will prepare them for what they'll face on the ground in West Africa. The most crucial part of their training is learning how to put on the personal protective equipment correctly. Putting the gear on alone takes around 15 minutes. Britain has been among the countries leading the global response to Ebola, already sending hundreds of medical staff to West Africa. The care facility that the Korean group will be deployed to was set up by Britain.
Very much. The purpose of the training has a lot to do with maximizing the effectiveness of the medics who are going out as part of the response, and making sure that the quality of care is high, but also safe for those who are providing it.
The Korean medical team is scheduled to fly to Sierra Leone this weekend and begin 1 month of caregiving at the end of December. More volunteers will be dispatched next year. While the epidemic has slowed in Guinea and Liberia, the number of patients in Sierra Leone continues to rise at an alarming rate. This is why health agencies say it's not only important to focus on treatment, but on preventing infection. The World Health Organization says new diagnostic tests may be available in the next few months, which could detect the virus in around 15 minutes. Kwon So-ah, ARIRANG News.
The South Korean government has approved an opposition party lawmaker's visit to the north to deliver a wreath commemorating the 3rd anniversary of the death of North Korea's late leader Kim Jong Il. Seoul's Unification Ministry says Representative Park Ji-won of the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy will travel to the inter-Korean border town of Kaesong later on this Tuesday. Park will be joined by 6 other delegates from the Kim Dae-jung Peace Center in Seoul. He will deliver the wreath in the name of Lee Hee-ho, the widow of late South Korean President Kim Dae-jung. The Unification Ministry, however, cautioned against overanalyzing the visit.
Now, it looks like North Korea's oldest and biggest friend will not be attending a ceremony tomorrow in honor of late North Korean leader Kim Jong Il. In an indication of their recently strained relations, China isn't going to send anyone to pay respects. For more on what this may mean for the future of China-North Korea ties, our Connie Kim reports.
When North Korea marks the 3rd anniversary of former leader Kim Jong Il's death on Wednesday, they're likely to do so without the representative from China. Last year, the Chinese ambassador to North Korea, Liu Hong-chai, appeared at a ceremony for the occasion. But a diplomatic source in Beijing says that won't be the case this year because Pyongyang did not extend an invite. Now that's representative of the frost that has developed on Sino-North Korea ties. There have been no high-level talks between Beijing and Pyongyang this year, and when Chinese President Xi Jinping visited the peninsula this past July, he didn't stop over in Pyongyang before coming to Seoul, as is a tradition for a Chinese leader. The two countries have been hoping to foster economic ties through the development of special economic zones, but those plans came to a screeching halt late last year with the execution of Chang Song-taek, who had been one of North Korea's most powerful figures and had close ties to Beijing. And in the 12 months since, China's crude oil exports to Pyongyang have been cut off completely, dropping from 578,000 tons last year to 0 this year. But there are some who predict relations will take a turn next year.
China is highly likely to side with North Korea when the UN Security Council discusses Pyongyang's human rights violations. This is when relations between the two countries will normalize.
Professor Yang expects high-level talks to take place at some point next year, by October at the latest, when North Korea marks the 70th anniversary of the Communist Party. Connie Kim, ARIRANG News.
Now, staying with North Korea, and the regime has warned the United States that it alone will have to bear the responsibility for a breakdown in efforts to denuclearize the Korean peninsula as international pressure mounts on Pyongyang over its human rights issues. The North's Foreign Ministry also says Washington will face the most severe counteraction for its offensive policy towards the North. The comments suggest Pyongyang could conduct another nuclear test. The warning comes a matter of days after the US Congress passed a bill calling for a full-blown probe into North Korea's political prison camps.
Japan's snap general election last weekend saw Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's party sweep to a landslide victory. However, as you might expect, given Abe's right-wing views and policies, worries are his election win could likely further strain Seoul-Tokyo ties. Lee Ji-yoon tells us why.
Korea isn't planning on holding summit talks with Japan anytime soon. A government source in Seoul says Korea will continue, quote, normalized relations with Japan, but there will be no summit. President Park Geun-hye made clear that she will not meet with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe unless Japan sincerely apologizes for its wartime atrocities. And with Abe's election win, many experts believe it's highly unlikely that he'll suddenly change his ultra-rightist political views. This means Abe is likely to keep on claiming the Korea-controlled Dokdo Island as Japan's territory. He's also likely to keep on denying that Japanese soldiers forced Korean women into sexual slavery during the Second World War. In fact, Abe reportedly plans to keep all his current cabinet ministers. One of those ministers is Eriko Yamatani. She wanted to remove a monument in New Jersey dedicated to the Korean women who were abducted by the Imperial Japanese Army. However, some experts say Japan might try to change its diplomatic measures for the better. One reason could be the U.S., Japan's close ally. It's been prodding Tokyo to improve ties with Seoul because the U.S. wants to boost Washington-Seoul-Tokyo ties to counter the rise of China. For now, though, experts say unless Abe steps away from his nationalistic path, diplomacy will continue to be his Achilles heel. Lee Jun, ARIRANG News.
Now, staying with the ripple effect from Abe's election victory, something that is also here to stay now is the Prime Minister's economic policies dubbed Abenomics. For more on the global impact of these policies, Connie Lee reports.
Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's election win enables the leader to push on with Abenomics, his set of aggressive fiscal and monetary expansionary policies.
You know, we're talking about 1, 2, 3 years for certain reforms to come through, and I think that gives him a strong mandate.
But the stronghold of Abenomics is expected to hurt Korean producers and exports. Bank of Korea Governor Eoh Jin-joo says that if Japanese firms start cutting prices on the backdrop of improved profits and financial structures, Korean products could face declining sales. Analysts say the value of the Japanese yen against the US dollar, the Korean won, and other currencies could continue to weaken and make Korean exports more expensive in the global market. This is bad news for Korean firms that compete with Japanese companies. So some advise that local businesses should strengthen their product competitiveness and invest more in their R&D during this time. The Prime Minister's Abenomics agenda was first introduced in 2012 to boost the economy, and despite controversy over its effects, it could stay as long as Abe stays in power, possibly until 2018. Connie Lee, ARIRANG News.
The ratio of young entrepreneurs that are behind new startups in Korea is on a downward spiral, which is prompting greater concerns about the current state and the future of the Korean economy. Hwang Jae has the details.
The ratio of new startups run by entrepreneurs in their 20s and 30s is on the decline in Korea, while those started by the older generation is on the steady rise. Data from Statistics Korea shows the proportion of startups run by those under the age of 40 stood at 27% in the first 3 quarters of this year, down from 28.2% in 2013. New startups led by young entrepreneurs made up for more than 30% of the total in 2008 when the agency first started compiling related data. The ratio of new startups established by those in their 50s, on the other hand, has risen 5.2 percentage points over the past 6 years. The number of new startups led by Koreans in their 50s or older also jumped more than 15% in the January to September period this year from a year earlier, while the number of new startups led by those in their 20s and 30s rose a mere 4.7% during the same period. Experts say the trend is bad news for the economy. The rising ratio of new startups by the older generation shows younger entrepreneurs who usually want to take more risks and open more innovative, dynamic businesses are put off by government regulations. They also say Korea's young people may have lost some of their entrepreneurial spirit. Hwang Jae, ARIRANG News.
The recent drop in crude oil prices is likely to start having a positive effect on the Korean economy starting in the second quarter of next year. Now, that's according to a report released by High Investment and Securities on Tuesday. It says the nation's manufacturing production will be among the first to feel a boost, and the effect will spread to other sectors as well. Breaking it down into specific industries, the semiconductor, display, and auto industries will benefit from the price fall, while the construction and food and beverage sectors will face a rather negative effect. Meanwhile, an earlier forecast by the Wall Street Journal says Korea will save greatly on energy import costs, equivalent to 2.4% of its gross domestic product, if global oil prices continue trending downward into next year.
Korea's trade minister is in Washington this week for talks on joining in negotiations for the US-led Trans-Pacific Partnership, more commonly known as the TPP. Yoon Sang-jik met with US Trade Representative Michael Froman on Monday for discussions about this very possibility. Korea first showed an interest in joining the 12-member TPP late last year, and Korea is pushing to join TPP at the earliest point possible. Now, this Trans-Pacific Partnership is an effort by the US to increase its economic presence in the Asia-Pacific region. Korea has concluded its second round of negotiations on joining it, which will include Australia, Japan and Vietnam. Sorry, pardon me. A new study has found that Koreans spend well over 3.5 hours a day using their smartphones in one way or another. The KT Economics and Management Research Laboratory says smartphone users in the nation are on their smartphones for a staggering 219 minutes a day. And this excludes time receiving or making actual phone calls. A previous study in 2012 found Koreans only spent about an hour and a half a day peering into their smartphones back then. People in their 20s use their smartphones the most, particularly during their rush hour commute and lunch breaks. Most of the time is spent on social network applications like Facebook and Twitter or mobile shopping sites. Now, the Korean government is going to apply information and communication technology to boost its response to and handling of disasters. Park Ji-won tells us more.
Korea's information and communications technology and scientific R&D abilities are among the best in the world, as proven by the nation's strong export items like smartphones and semiconductors. The government wants to foster the nation's strength in scientific areas to bolster two main sectors: disaster management systems and agriculture. The decision was reached at a presidential office meeting presided over by President Park Geun-hye on Tuesday, with over 100 experts in the field taking part. Korea has suffered a series of big disasters this year alone, like Seoul ferry accident and a recent ventilation grate collapse in October that killed more than a dozen people. So the following steps are the government's strategies to apply ICT to disaster management. As for better prevention, the government will widely install safety sensors to diverse facilities like aged bridges and tunnels. And to swiftly respond to any disasters, intelligent CCTV surveillance systems will be used, which has artificial intelligence software that can recognize and analyze dangerous situations. To minimize damage from disasters, the government plans to focus on developing disaster management simulator programs and improving cutting-edge rescue facilities like rescue robot technologies. The government will also apply ICT to the nation's farming sectors to make them into higher value-added industries. Universities, businesses, and the government will work together on developing smart farm models by 2016, which will use diverse information technologies to improve agricultural productivity. R&D investments and education for nurturing technology-intensive agricultural venture projects are also one of the government's strategies to strengthen the nation's agricultural sector. Park Ji-won, ARIRANG News.
Good
Good afternoon. Now, most of snow has let up and it's bright outside here in the capital, but parts of the Chungcheongdo and Jeollado provinces are still receiving snowfall at this hour, and some spots will be getting up to 10 centimeters of heavy snow throughout the day and possibly into tomorrow. And the cold wave is back, along with strong gusty winds, dropping the high to below zero for the capital areas, and the lows and highs in Seoul will hover around -4, while Daegu and Gwangju should peak at 5 and 8, and Busan, or 3 that is, and Busan will peak at 6 this afternoon. And as for the other regions, Jeju Island and Dokdo will be getting up to 7, while Daejeon see a high at the freezing mark. So the high in Seoul will only peak at -4 this afternoon, and tomorrow morning the low will plunge to -12, and on Thursday it's going to be even colder, kicking off at -13, so be sure to dress extra warmly for the next couple of days. And when the cold snap eases up a bit by the end of the week, another band of rain or snow is in the forecast. That's all for me today, and let's send it back to Mark and Jin-joo in the studio.
Thank you, Jian, for the weather update. And that's about it for this edition of Newsline at Noon.
Certainly is. Jin-joo and I will be back at the same time on Wednesday. Until then, goodbye.